my name is Kaityn Avila. I graduated in 2022 and I got degrees in international studies with a focus in history and communication. I grew up in a really tiny town of about 5,000 people in Northern California. I live with my mom and dad and my two brothers. I'm a middle child, so older brother, younger brother. I would say that the school that I went to was probably underfunded, which is not like a controversial or strange thing to say, especially I think for small town schools. But yeah, it was growing up was quiet. Like it was a quiet town. School life, I was always like a really big fan of school, which sounds dorky, but like I feel like that's the case for a lot of people. School is kind of fun. But I was always really into more of like things that are considered the arts, I suppose. So history, English, grammar, music, art, those were all kind of like my favorite sorts of subjects. And so I think that kind of followed me throughout my sort of like younger years, etc. So yeah, I mean, and growing up, I guess, like my parents were always really supportive of me, but they weren't really able to help all that much with school stuff because my dad didn't go to high school at all, and my mom, she got her GED, didn't go to college. Neither of them were like super into school growing up, so neither of them were able to like help me with homework or anything like that. And I was a first-gen student, so you know, there was a lot of things that like they couldn't help with, but support was something that like they always gave me and my brothers. We always knew we were going to go to college, that sort of thing. Yeah, so in high school, my education was more, I guess it's hard to say it was well-rounded in a way. Of course, we hit all of the like required things. So like, you know, certain number of years of science, certain number of years of Spanish, or, you know, language, but the only language we had was Spanish. And, you know, that sort of thing. But I think where I really thrived was like, for me, it was my music class, my band class. So I played the flute, and it was like, I played the flute since 6th grade, and just to show kind of like the underfunding of the school a little better, I had the same band teacher from 6th grade all the way through high school. So yeah, she was dealing with literally 6th graders, 7th, 8th, and high school throughout her day. And so that was great because, like, you know, she became sort of like a pillar of support for a lot of us, and she was always like encouraging us about college as well. She's a fantastic band teacher. She's actually still teaching at the school, so love that for my little brother who's taking her now as well. So yeah, high school, I tried really hard with like math and science, and I remember there were times where like I was trying to do my math homework, and sometimes I would just start crying because it was so hard. Because I guess science and math have never really been my thing. I've always gotten like good grades, but it's always been like a really hard effort and a really like strenuous process. And so it occurred to me as I was in high school, like, oh, this isn't something I enjoy. And so I took AP classes, but I did not take any AP science or math classes. Not that my school offered very many, but like the two that they did have, I did not take. And so when it started becoming time for me to like apply for college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so when I was applying and they tell you to put down your major, I really didn't want to put undecided because I thought that would kind of look bad, which it doesn't. They don't care if you put undecided, I don't think. But my mom was like, well, you really enjoy English, why don't you put down English? So I applied to multiple UCs, and all of them I applied under some form of English literature for UCSD in particular. And so that's what I ended up originally going to school for. I decided to go to UC San Diego. This is going to sound a little bad because I didn't get into my top 2 schools. which were UC Berkeley and UCLA. And I think that's the kind of the case for quite a few people at UCSD, which is not saying anything bad about UCSD. It's just like, that's kind of the way things happen sometimes. It's interesting because the day after all of these decisions, like in the time that after all the UC decisions had come out, I remember me and like some of my classmates were all talking, and one of them, he was like, yeah, I got into UC Berkeley, but I was denied at UC San Diego. And I was just like, well, that feels kind of strange. But I think that was like my first little inkling of, oh, this is not actually like a failure or a bad thing. UCSD is like a good school. I applied to it for a reason. But I ended up choosing it over UC Santa Cruz, partially because my older brother, he at the time was also a student at UC San Diego, and he had told me a lot of nice things about, how much he enjoyed it, how nice the campus was, how much he was enjoying his classes. And so I figured, why not give myself that sort of like, I guess crutch is kind of what it was at the time, of having my brother there, because I was moving 600 miles away, which is a hard thing for anyone to do. So having my older brother was kind of like a big selling point for me. And so beyond, the academics, of course, UCSD is like a top school, and it's just, it's a very well-known school for what it does. And so beyond that, though, having my older brother was like a big plus. My first year of college was a huge adjustment. And it was something that I've heard a lot of other students talking about, especially first-gen students, where they're kind of like, I don't know if I belong here. It's, imposter syndrome is something that comes up a lot, especially among first-gen students and Latino students in particular. And so I was, surrounded by all these people who were just so smart and so incredible. And I was out here getting like my first C's in classes ever in my life. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm kind of dumb. Maybe like I kind of like high school was easy, but this is hard. Maybe this isn't for me. At no point did I really consider quitting, but like it was really kind of like being knocked back and taken aback by like this concept of, oh, I'm not one of the smartest kids in school anymore, which was humbling and I think very, very important for me to learn and to understand that like you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, which I know is a big blow to the ego, and it was for me, and I'm sure it is for many other students. But yeah, it was just so incredibly different. And all of a sudden I was taking all of these other kinds of classes that sort of like I didn't want to take. And like Warren College has some really interesting GEs that I was kind of like questioning why I had to take them. But I think, with hindsight looking back, GEs are important, like whether we want to take them or not, it makes us well-rounded people. So like, yeah, but that first year I felt very out of place and very alone too. Because, when you go into college, all of a sudden you have to make new friends again, and that might be something that you haven't done since you were like a child. So like, the first year was just very, I felt very isolated. Pretty much the only person I talked to outside of classes was my brother. And he was busy with his own life and his own friends and stuff. So like, that wasn't super often. So it occurred to me kind of like part of the way through the year that I needed to do something. And that's how I kind of ended up pushing myself off the edge. And I applied to work at the LGBT Resource Center for their internship program. And so like that following quarter, I think it was spring quarter of 2019, I guess, we had to do like a 1-unit class to sort of prepare us for the internship. And even then I was still kind of like, I don't know these people. I'm not comfortable with these people. And so it wouldn't be until my second year that I actually started making friends. And so that was something that like my first year was very much just like really hard because I was constantly like, I just want to go home. I don't like being here. And that was something that I really sort of abruptly grew out of in my second year, which was a good thing. But it was just so strange to like have spent an entire year feeling that way. So yeah, I think that the first year is kind of hard for everyone. It just depends on in what ways, I guess. The way I ended up with the majors that I did is sort of a wild ride. Like I said, I went in as an English Lit major. I spent 1 quarter as an English Lit major, took one English Lit class, enjoyed it somewhat, but realized kind of this isn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And that's kind of college, especially your first and second year, is kind of a trial and error process, or it should be, in my opinion. So I decided that's not what I want to do. So I switched to creative writing. And then I focused for the rest of the year on keeping working through my GEs, and I took some Spanish classes because that's required for English majors. And so I went into my second year as a creative writing major. And I figured, I have this GE for Warren College. So the way it works for Warren is that you have to do programs of concentration, which I like to think of as like mini minors, because they're not quite enough classes to count as a minor, but they're still somewhat like in that range. So because my major was an arts and humanities major, I had to take a program of concentration in social science and in STEM. And so for social science, I figured I had already taken some linguistic classes. And so I was like, that's fun, but maybe I want to try something else. And so I landed on communication. And I fell in love with this class. It was Com 10, which is the very first communication class you can take. The professor was great. I don't know, within the first couple weeks, I was just like, this is really something I'm enjoying. And so I remember talking to my supervisor at work at the time, and I was like, yeah, I'm thinking of changing my major. And he knew at that point that I'd changed my major very not that long ago. And so he was like, are you sure you want to do that? It's only been a couple weeks that you've been in this major. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. And so I turned around and I switched to my major while I was in one of my creative writing classes. I had just been sitting there and I was just like, I'm just not enjoying this. I'm going to change my major. And long story short, I ended up just leaving in the middle of that class because I was like, I'm done. I dropped this class. I'm out of the major. I'm just going to go home, which was probably a not very nice thing to do. Not very respectful to the person who was teaching, but it wasn't an actual class session. So that dampens the blow just a little bit, I think. So I ended up switching majors to communication. And as I was taking more comm classes, I was like, wow, this is really interesting stuff, because the comm department at UC San Diego is incredibly vast, and just the diversity of, the people teaching, as well as the types of courses that are offered. There's pretty much something for everyone, I think. And so through my second year, I was a comm major and I was super happy. But then it occurred to me, okay, so I have this comm major, which means now I'm in the social sciences bracket, which means that I still need to do an arts and humanities program of concentration. Because at that time I'd been taking random classes for my STEM one, which they allow you to do a sort of interdisciplinary one for only one of your programs of concentration. So I chose STEM for that one, so I could kind of dip into as many different sort of types of courses as I wanted, just to see to experience kind of a breadth of STEM classes, to see if there was anything I did enjoy about STEM, which resulted in, I learned a lot, but no, I do not like STEM, and I never will, probably. Nothing wrong with it for other people, but just not my thing. So going into that summer, I had been thinking about adding a second major. And this was another thing that my supervisor was like, are you sure that that's a good idea? And I was like, yeah, 2 majors for the price of one. That's 2 bachelor's degrees. I'll take it. So I applied as an international studies major as well, with a focus in history, and they approved my application. And so going into my junior year, I was finally at sort of my endpoint, which was international studies, history, and communication double major. Yeah, and like I tried out a couple of minors throughout like junior and senior year, but like they didn't end up sticking just because like I didn't want to push myself that hard, and I felt like I was pushing myself super hard trying to do these minors. And so it occurred to me like I don't have to do that, and especially after like one of my professors who became a mentor, she was like, you don't need that in order to do what you want to do. And so I was like, okay, you're probably right. I can probably sort of like calm down a little. So yeah, that's how I ended up international studies, history, and communications double major. So I decided that I wanted to go to grad school pretty late in the game. So it was the end of my junior year. I had spent pretty much the rest of my college career, anytime somebody asked me if I wanted to go to grad school, being like, who has that kind of money? Like, why would I go to grad school? It just didn't feel like something that was like accessible to me. And I didn't feel like it was something that I really needed to do. And so I just had kind of like dismissed the idea and moved on until I took a class on Black Panther, which is a class that was both on like the movie and the comic books Black Panther, but was also sort of integrating the history of the Black Panther Party. And it was just an incredible class with an incredible professor, Zainabu Davis, who she ended up becoming like a mentor to me. And I went to her like, you know, with all of my concerns about grad school. That's getting ahead of myself a little bit though. So I took this class, and in this class, she was having us do these creative assignments instead of like, you know, term papers and like tests and all that sort of stuff. And so I found during one of the assignments, she asked us to either write like a little paper, or we could do it in screenplay format. And so I wrote, you know, this assignment in screenplay format because I thought that would be easier than writing a paper, which it was and it wasn't. It was because like I had so much fun writing it. It wasn't because formatting is kind of formatting is a nightmare when you're using a Google Doc, but like that's beside the point. So I really enjoyed writing this little screenplay, and she when she graded it, and I didn't know this at the time because she had graded our assignments, but she accidentally didn't release them to us. And so she didn't end up releasing like the assignments back to us until like really close to the end of the quarter. And so we had like, you know, a big paper due at the end. And so she had actually written in like the comments of this one assignment from like the beginning of the quarter, if you wanted to do your final paper in screenplay format, that would be, you can do that if you would like, because this was a great read. And I was super excited. I had already gotten a couple pages into my final paper, but I emailed her and I said, if you're serious, I would love to do my final as a screenplay. And she was like, if you think you have time for it, yeah, of course. And I said, okay, how many pages do you want me to do? Like, I can do this, I can do that. And she was just like, do whatever feels right. And I ended up with like a 15-page, I think, paper. That was just like a mini screenplay on the topic that she had given us. It was just like an expanded version of like that first assignment. And as I was doing it, I was like, wow, like this is really fun. I'm really enjoying this. And it kind of like put into place a bunch of different things that I had been thinking about before. You know, I was always having these conversations with people where I was like ragging on like TV shows and movies. And like in my mind, what I was saying was like, I could do better, which was arrogant and probably not true at the time, especially. But, you know, I took that class and I really enjoyed it. And it started like sort of like sinking in for me that maybe that's something I could do. I'd already been taking classes on like film theory and stuff like that, and I'd been really enjoying them. And so I started thinking, you know, maybe this is something I could do. And so going into my final quarter of junior year, I was like, okay, I need to have like a game plan. I need to figure out what I need to do. And so I started putting together a portfolio. And so essentially for grad school, like especially for art, you kind of have to have, you know, examples of your work. And so at that point, like all of the stories I had come up with were still, you know, like in my head. And so I was like, I need to start translating this into paper, or electronic paper, I suppose. And so I started writing, and I found that like it was something I enjoyed. And like once I was able to like use those tools of like knowing how to use screenplay format and, you know, knowing story structure and like how to read a film, especially like that class really helped me with like constructing actual, like if I'm making a short film, how do I construct that, the plot, you know? And so going into summer after my junior year, I was like, okay, I need to start writing stat. And so I did. And I started looking at different colleges I could apply to. And then during that, like the first quarter of my senior year, I started talking to Professor Davis more. I took another one of her classes. This one was on Black women filmmakers, and that was a fantastic class. And so I was talking to her more, and she was telling me, I remember the very first day I went to her, it was the first time I'd ever gone to office hours in my life, and which was a mistake because it was such, there's really nothing like having that one-on-one connection with a professor. I think is extremely helpful, and especially if like that professor is somebody that is in the field that you want to go into, because Professor Davis is a filmmaker, first and foremost. And so I was talking to her and I said, I just feel like I'm starting too late, because it was my senior year of college and like I have practically nothing. I'm starting with nothing. And she looked at me and she said, there is no such thing as too late. Everything you've done in your life up to this point has led you here and given you the experience you need to tell your stories to the world. And I just remember like I was like tearing up a little bit because like I didn't know at the time that like that was something that I needed to hear so bad. Because like even now I'm like, what am I doing? Like I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I don't have enough experience. But I think the important thing was knowing that like I had the tools, you know, I had some of the tools, and that it was okay to like seek out help in using those tools, I suppose. And so it was just like an incredible experience for somebody to tell me like, you know, you're not too late. There's no such thing as too late. You know, there's no point in your life when you can stop learning. And so like we kept meeting throughout the quarter. And I had been thinking of applying to all these like, you know, really big name film schools. And then I don't know, it just hit me like, I can't get into those, and that's kind of okay. Like, I don't think they would be very helpful for me in this time in my life. So I ended up applying to a couple different CSUs. And I was kind of just like putting all of my eggs in exactly 3 baskets. So I applied to Cal State LA, CSU Fullerton, and CSU Northridge. And so I I wrote like a 32-page short film screenplay over the course of like that first quarter through to like when applications were due in March. I had a couple of short stories that I'd written that I sent in as supplemental materials. I mean, the application process was kind of brutal. You know, having to come up with these, you know, like my different examples of my work out of thin air was like really stressful. But it was kind of nice to challenge myself. And then when I ended up getting into Cal State LA and Fullerton and waitlisted for Northridge, it kind of felt like it paid off, you know. It showed me that like it wasn't too late after all. I was able to get in on my own merit after, you know, being primarily self-taught. And so, you know, the whole application process, the hardest part was probably like working up the courage to actually talk to like my professor and like another, because I needed 2 different academic recommenders. So I talked to a TA that I had taken like an actual class with. So he was like a grad student who was actually a professional science fiction writer who was teaching this science fiction class during the summer. And we talked a bit, and he was like, oh, I'm not sure if like, you know, I would count as an academic reference. And I was like, you were my teacher. I think you count, even if you're just like, even if you're a grad student, you were still my teacher, so you count. And so building that relationship with him and with Professor Davis, and that was just like the hardest thing, because I was like, they don't care. Like, like, why would they care? But the reality is, of course they care. They're teaching, they're professors, they're grad students who are TAing, et cetera, for a reason. They want to teach people, they want to help people. And so of course they cared, and of course they were wanting to help me as much as they could. So I think like the moral of that story is like, take advantage of all resources available to you, including people. People are resources too. So yeah, the application process, interesting, brutal, but it all paid off in the end. I go to Cal State LA, and I am in the MFA program. So that's the Master of Fine Arts, which is a terminal degree. Terminal degree meaning that you can teach at the college level after you have obtained that degree, which another example that is a PhD. A PhD takes much longer though. So my MFA program is a 3-year program, and it is in television, film, and theater writing. And what I want to do with that, man, it's the worst question. What I want to do with my writing degree is write, I suppose. There's a lot of different things I think that I could do with it that I really just feel like I need to get more experience in before I really decide what I want to do. Writing is of course my passion, and that's what I'm here to learn how to do. I've already written a 1-act play since being here, and I think that's something that I never thought I would write a play. But I have. And so like I feel like it's kind of like, I didn't think I was a theater person at all, but now I've written a play and I feel like, you know, I could be a theater person. So it really just goes to show that as I'm learning, that's when I'm going to figure out the one thing that I do want to do. And so I have so many options, and I don't really know yet what I want to do with my degree. I guess the really far end goal is I do eventually want to be a professor. But that feels like more of a, after I have, you know, like whatever my career is, you know, there's no such thing as retirement these days. Who has the money for retirement? But after I have my career, whatever that may be, I do want to sort of like play the same role that Professor Davis played for me, in, you know, have whatever experience I've had and be able to pass that on to a new generation of people who can really serve to further diversify, you know, the film and TV, as well as the theater sort of like industries, because frankly, there's not enough people of color, there's not enough queer people, there's not enough women out there doing these things. And so if I can, you know, play the same role that she played for me, and make sure they know that it's an option for them, that's sort of like the long-term goal, I guess. The advice that I have for students who might attend UCSD is, one, do it. Attend UCSD, please. Even if you don't go into the comm department, which I've really gassed up this entire this entire interview. They have there's so many things you can learn at UCSD, and I think that it's just such an incredibly big college that like you will find whatever you love. And that sort of leads me into my next piece of advice is put those GEs to good use. Like, I know a lot of people complain about them. A lot of people don't know why they have to take them. And that was me in my first year. But put them to good use. A lot of these GEs, you have your choice of the classes that can, you know, count towards that GE. Like the DEI class, the diversity, equity, and inclusion class, there's a huge list of classes that count towards that. Pick something that might be interesting to you. You know, especially Warren College, the programs of concentration, pick something that you might not know that like you're interested in. Pick things that are like weird classes that you would never have picked on your own, I guess. I mean, I ended up taking a physics class on life in the universe, and that was like an incredible and strange experience that they had a class kind of like on aliens. And I took that class. And while I didn't like discover a newfound love for science, I did learn things, and I did, you know, find things that were interesting in that class. And anything you learn, you know, in these GE classes, you can take with you, even if it's a linguistics class, you can take that, whatever you learn from that, to your STEM your STEM courses, your STEM major. Really just like let yourself learn. That's what you're here for. College is for learning, and it's for exploring. And I think that if you don't explore, you're kind of like losing out on part of what makes college awesome. And my final piece of advice is talk to your professors, talk to your TAs. Like I said before, people are a resource too. And so I think that it's important to know that like, you know, like all of these resources are available to you. And it's not just like, you know, your professors or your TAs. It's also, we have a lot of community resource centers. The LGBT Resource Center, I brought it before, Women's Center, Cross-Cultural Center, all of these different places that have, you know, resources available for you, including people that you can talk to and build community with. So yeah, take advantage of all resources that are available to you, including the people that are there to help you.